The notification came at 11:47 on a Wednesday morning, and Celeste almost didn't check her phone. She was in the middle of a budget review, spreadsheets open across two monitors, coffee going cold on her desk. The buzz against the glass surface was probably her mom again, asking about Thanksgiving. She reached for it without looking away from the numbers, but it wasn't her mom. It was a calendar reminder she'd set 6 weeks ago, back when the world still made sense. OB appointment, 11 a.m., Dr. Hewitt. She had forgotten to delete it after she rescheduled. Or maybe she hadn't forgotten. Maybe some part of her had wanted to see it pop up like this, like a bruise you press just to confirm it still hurts. She was 8 weeks pregnant. The only person who knew was her sister Petra, and Petra lived in Phoenix and had promised to take it to her grave. Celeste set the phone face down and looked back at the spreadsheets. The numbers blurred. She pressed the heel of her hand against her sternum, where the nausea had been living for the past 2 weeks, a slow simmering wrongness that started when she woke up and didn't leave until she fell asleep. She had not told her husband yet. That sentence, every time she thought it, felt like touching a live wire. She had not told her husband yet. As though there were a version of this where she still could. Where she could go home tonight and say, "Theo, I need to tell you something." And he would sit down and take her hands, and his face would do that thing it used to do, that open, careful thing, and everything would still be possible. But she had seen what she had seen, and there was no version of this anymore that looked like that. 3 weeks earlier, Celeste had driven herself to the funeral home on Marchmont Avenue to drop off her father-in-law's insurance paperwork. Theodore Sr. had died 11 days before quietly, the way his son always said he would. In his sleep, no fuss, no drama. Theodore Jr., her husband Theo, was supposed to handle the paperwork himself, but he'd gotten a call from a client the morning it was due and asked if she could take it. She hadn't minded. She loved Theodore Sr., she still did, even now that he was gone. He had called her his daughter from the first month she and Theo were together, which was something her own father hadn't managed in 31 years of trying. The parking lot of the funeral home was half full. A black town car idled near the entrance. Celeste pulled in, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror out of habit. Something she'd started doing again since she found out she was pregnant, this unconscious checking, as though her face might look different from the outside. And grabbed the envelope from the passenger seat. She was almost at the door when she heard it. Theo's laugh. She knew that laugh. She had been falling asleep to it for 6 years. It was low and private, the laugh he only used when his guard was down, when he wasn't performing anything for anyone. She hadn't heard it in months, actually. Not since before his father got sick, and the sound of it stopped her cold on the front steps of the funeral home. She turned. He was standing around the side of the building, near a small garden where the funeral home had planted rosemary and white hydrangeas. He was in his good suit. His back was mostly to her, but she could see the angle of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, and she could see the woman standing in front of him. She was younger than Celeste, early 20s maybe, and she was very pregnant, 7 months, 8 months. The kind of pregnant that announces itself, that you can't look away from. She had her hands folded under the curve of her stomach, and Theo had his hand on her arm, and he was saying something to her in a low voice, and she was nodding, and then he laughed again. That laugh. That private, unguarded laugh that Celeste hadn't heard in months. The envelope with Theodore Sr.'s insurance paperwork slipped from Celeste's fingers. She didn't notice until she heard it hit the pavement. Theo turned at the sound. For a moment, just a moment, his face was completely open. She could read everything in it the way you can read a book you've memorized. Surprise. Then something fast and awful. Then the shutting down, the smoothing over, the version of his face he wore at work and at parties, and in any room where he needed to be someone she could count on. "Celeste," he said. She bent down and picked up the envelope. She did not know why she did this. Some reflex of function, of purpose. She had come here to do a thing, and she would do the thing. She walked past him into the funeral home. She handed the envelope to the woman at the front desk. She signed where it asked her to sign. She said thank you. She walked back out. Theo was waiting by her car. The other woman was gone. "That's Naomi," he said. She was close with my dad. She works for the firm that managed his estate." Celeste looked at him. She looked at him for a long time, the way you look at something when you are trying to decide if you are seeing it correctly. "Okay," she said. "Celeste, I have to get back to work." She drove 4 blocks and then pulled into a CVS parking lot and sat there for 45 minutes. She didn't cry. She just sat. The nausea was worse than usual. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach. 8 weeks, she thought. 8 weeks. She didn't say anything that night, or the next night. She told herself she needed more information. She told herself she was being rational. What she was actually doing was learning a new way to breathe. Small, controlled inhales, exhales that didn't shake, so she could exist in the same rooms as Theo without coming apart. She went back to Dr. Hewitt's office alone. She stared at the ultrasound screen. There was a heartbeat. She had not expected to feel what she felt when she saw it, which was something huge and ungovernable, entirely separate from everything else that was happening. She asked the technician for 2 printed copies of the photo. She put one in her wallet. She didn't know what she planned to do with it. She called Petra from the parking garage. "I think he has another woman," she said. "I think she might be pregnant with his baby." Petra was quiet for a beat. "What do you mean you think?" "I mean I saw them at the funeral home." "She was." Celeste stopped. "She was very pregnant, Petra. And the way he looked at her." "Did you ask him?" "Not yet." "Celeste, I know. You have to ask him." "I know." She didn't ask him. What she did instead was small and shameful, and she would not be proud of it. She went through his phone while he was in the shower. She had never done this before in 6 years. She had never needed to. She found what she was looking for in under 2 minutes. Not because Theo was careless, but because the truth has a way of not hiding very well once you've already seen the shape of it. Naomi, 18 months of messages. The kind of messages you write to someone at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep. "I keep thinking about what you said. I don't know how to do this. I'm scared. I miss you." And from Theo, "I know. I'm sorry. We'll figure it out. I promise." We, not I, not you. We. Celeste set his phone back exactly where she'd found it. She went to the bathroom and ran cold water over her wrists. She looked at herself in the mirror. She was 33 years old. She had a master's degree in finance. She had built a department from 4 people to 22. She had buried her mother-in-law and sat with her father-in-law in the hospital during his final week and held his hand while he slept because his son had a work call he couldn't move. She had done all of this, and she was 8 weeks pregnant and completely alone. She went to bed before Theo got out of the shower. She lay very still. When he climbed in beside her, she kept her breathing slow and even, the new way she had learned. He didn't reach for her. He fell asleep quickly. She stared at the ceiling until 4 in the morning. The next few weeks were a kind of survival she didn't have a word for. She went to work. She ate what she could keep down. She had lunch with a colleague named Everett once a week, the way they had been doing for 2 years. Just because it was the 1 hour of every week when she was allowed to talk about something other than what was happening in her chest. Everett was the kind of person who had been in her life so long she sometimes forgot to see him clearly. They'd met on the first day of graduate school, both of them late to orientation, sliding into seats at the back of the auditorium and exchanging a glance that said, "We are the same kind of people." He had been at her wedding. He had sent flowers when Theodore Sr. died. He called to check in, not as a thing to be done, but because that was simply who he was. She had not told him about the pregnancy or about Theo, but she had stopped pretending, when she was with him, that she was fine. One afternoon at their usual table near the window, she pushed her soup around and didn't say anything for a while. "You don't have to tell me what's happening," Everett said, "but I want you to know that I can see that something is." She looked up. He wasn't pushing, he was just offering, the way he always did, like a door held open, no pressure to walk through. "I'm tired," she said, which was the truest thing she could manage. "I know," he said. "You look it, not in a bad way. In a caring too much way." She almost told him then. She got close. She opened her mouth and felt the shape of the words. "I found out I'm pregnant and I think my husband has been with another woman for a year and a half." And then she closed it again. "I'm working through some things," she said. "Okay," he said. "Just that." "Okay." She thought about that word on the drive home. The way he said it. Like it was enough. Like she didn't owe him more than what she was able to give. She hadn't felt that from anyone in a very long time. The confrontation, when it finally came, was not dramatic. It was a Tuesday evening in October, and Celeste came home to find Theo sitting at the kitchen table with his tie loosened and a glass of whiskey in front of him, which he almost never drank on weeknights. And she understood without being told that he knew something was coming. "I went through your phone," she said. She set her bag on the counter and stood there. "I know about Naomi. I know it's been 18 months. I know she's pregnant." Theo looked at his glass. "How far along is she?" Celeste asked. 7 months, he said, very quietly. She had thought she was prepared for him to confirm it. She had spent weeks preparing. But something in her chest still lurched. Some animal thing that didn't care about preparation. "Is it yours?" A pause, then, "Yes." She nodded. She was surprised by how steady her hands were. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from him, not because she wanted to be near him, but because her legs felt suddenly unreliable. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I'm not going to beg you. I'm not going to ask you what she has that I don't. I'm not going to have that conversation. What I am going to ask you is what you want, right now. Not what you think I want to hear, what you actually want." He looked at her for a long moment. He had the decency, at least, not to try to perform regret that she would have seen through anyway. "I don't know," he said. "That's not an answer. I know, Theo." Her voice was very level. She surprised herself with it. "You have a child coming into this world in 2 months. You need to decide where you are going to be when that happens." He looked at her. Something moved across his face. "Where are you going to be?" he asked. She thought about the ultrasound photo in her wallet. She thought about Petra in Phoenix, who didn't know all of it yet. She thought about Everett and that door held open and the word "okay" said in a voice with no pressure in it. "I'm going to be exactly where I should be," she said. "I've been figuring that out." She got up. She went to the bedroom and closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed for a while. Then she called Petra and told her everything. She moved out 17 days later, not dramatically, not with suitcases thrown from windows or anything shouted that couldn't be taken back. She rented a furnished apartment 4 miles away and moved her clothes and her files and the 4 plants she'd kept alive through 2 cross-country moves and a pandemic. She left the furniture because they had picked it out together and she didn't want it. Her parents, her dad especially, who had never entirely trusted Theo but had been polite about it for 6 years, drove up from Richmond to help. Her dad carried boxes without asking questions. Her mom cried a little in the kitchen of the new apartment while she was loading the cabinet liners, and then pulled herself together and said, "You're going to be okay, see? You've always been okay," and Celeste believed her, mostly. She told her parents about the pregnancy on the second day, in the new apartment, sitting on the floor because there was only one chair. Her dad looked at the ceiling for a while. Her mom held Celeste's hand. "You don't have to do any of this alone," her mom said. "I know," Celeste said, and she realized she was starting to believe it. She told Everett a week after that, over their usual lunch. She told him all of it: Theo, Naomi, the funeral home, the phone, the Tuesday night conversation, the apartment, the pregnancy. He listened to all of it without interrupting. His coffee went cold. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I should have seen more," he said. "I knew something was wrong. I didn't push hard enough." "You pushed exactly the right amount," she said. "I wasn't ready." "Are you ready now?" She thought about it. "I think I'm getting there." He looked at her the way he sometimes did, the way she had spent 2 years not examining too closely. "I want to help," he said. "Not in a I'm just saying. Whatever that looks like. Doctor's appointments, moving boxes, dinner when you don't want to cook. I'm here." She looked at him across the table, this person she had known for 8 years, and somehow kept at a careful distance because she had been married, and because it had been easier to keep the door only slightly open rather than walk through it. "Why?" she asked. Not challenging. Genuinely curious. He held her gaze. "Because it's you," he said. "It's always been because it's you." She looked down at her coffee. She felt something shift, quiet and tectonic, the way things shift when something that has been true for a long time finally gets to be said out loud. "Okay," she said. Just that. The same word he had given her, back when she needed it. Her daughter was born on a Thursday in late February, 7 pounds 2 ounces, in the hospital on Clement Street with Petra on one side and her mom on the other. The labor was long. At some point around hour 14, Celeste decided she was the strongest person who had ever lived, and nobody in the room argued with her. She named her Iris, after nothing in particular, just because when she looked at her daughter's face for the first time, wrinkled and furious and entirely herself, the name came up from somewhere that didn't need explaining. Everett was in the waiting room. He had driven 2 hours to be there because Petra had texted him without asking permission, and when Celeste found out, she didn't mind. She was glad. She texted him from the recovery room, "She's here. She's perfect. You can come in." He sat in the chair by the window and held Iris like someone who was not going to drop her, which was the only thing Celeste required of anyone in that room. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Her dad came the next morning and cried in the hallway where he thought no one could see him. Theo sent a text that said, "Congratulations. I'm glad she's healthy." Celeste read it once and set her phone face down on the table. She had her own thoughts about Theo, her own eventual understanding, that would take more time than a hospital stay to fully arrive at. But none of that was for today. Today was for Iris, small and warm and new, breathing in a bassinet 2 feet away. The months after were not easy, but they were real in a way that Celeste had not felt in a long time. She went back to work at 14 weeks. Iris went to daycare 4 days a week. Celeste's mom came every other weekend from Richmond and called every evening at 7, which was the time Iris usually decided to be her most dramatic self, and they would sometimes just hold the phone up so her mom could hear it. She and Everett ate dinner together most Thursdays. She stopped telling herself she was being careful. She started telling herself the truth instead, which was that she was happy, in a way that was quieter and more specific than the kind of happy she'd been chasing for years. It fit differently, like something made for her instead of something she'd been trying to fit herself into. One evening in November, Iris asleep in the next room, dishes still in the sink, Everett said something about how much he liked Thursday nights. "Me too," Celeste said. He looked at her. The apartment was warm. The city was doing its city things outside. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I want you to know that. I don't need you to have it all figured out. I just want you to know." She thought about the parking lot outside the CVS, the 45 minutes she'd sat there in silence, the ceiling she'd stared at until 4 in the morning, the envelope she'd bent down to pick up off the pavement because she had come to do a thing and she would do the thing. She thought about how far she was from that woman now. Not left behind, she was still that woman in all the ways that mattered, but further along, somewhere she hadn't known she was walking toward. "I know," she said. "I know you're not." She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. He turned his palm up and held on. In the next room, Iris made a small sound in her sleep, something contented and purposeless, the way babies talk to their dreams. Celeste sat in the warm kitchen of her own life and felt, for the first time in a very long time, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be.